Hey there, ready to level up your life with the power of atomic habits. We're diving into James Clear's game-changing book today, and trust me, this isn't just another self-help cliche.
It's really about understanding the science behind how those tiny 1% improvements we make each day can lead to remarkable, almost unbelievable results over time.
Right, it's like that idea of compound interest, but applied
Yes.
to our daily habits. And to really get this, we've got to start with the foundation, how our brains are wired.
Exactly. Our brains are wired for efficiency, always seeking those shortcuts. Habits, at their core, are just that automatic solutions to problems we encounter regularly.
Like when you brush your teeth or drive to work, you're not consciously thinking about every step you're on autopilot.
Precisely. And that autopilot, that's our brain's way of conserving energy. But here's the kicker. This same autopilot mechanism applies to both our good and bad habits.
Which is where things get really interesting, right? Because if we can figure out how to consciously manipulate the system, we can essentially hack our brains to work for us, not against us.
Exactly. And that's where James Clear's 4 laws of behavior change come in. These laws provide a framework for understanding how to make good habits obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying.
Okay, let's dive into that framework because that's where the rubber meets the road, right? This is all about turning knowledge into action. So the first law is make it obvious. It seems straightforward, but I have a feeling there's more to it than meets the eye.
You're right, most of us are surprisingly unaware of our own habits. We go through our days on autopilot, not really paying attention to those automatic behaviors that shape our lives.
So how do we break free from that autopilot mode and start becoming more aware of those subconscious patterns?
Well, Clear suggests a simple yet powerful tool, pointing and calling. It sounds a little silly, but the act of verbally acknowledging your habits as you're doing them can be surprisingly effective.
You mean literally saying out loud, I'm reaching for the cookie jar, or I'm scrolling through social media, even if nobody else is around.
Exactly. It might seem strange at first, but that simple act of verbalization disrupts the autopilot and brings those unconscious behaviors into conscious awareness.
Okay, I can see how that would be a real wake-up call for some people, myself included. It's like holding up a mirror to those mindless habits we don't even realize we're repeating.
Exactly. And once we're aware of those patterns, we can start to question them. Are they serving us? Are they aligned with our goals? Or are they simply habits we've picked up along the way that no longer serve us?
It's about taking back control. Instead of being a slave to our habits, we become the architects of our lives, consciously choosing the behaviors that support our well-being and our aspirations.
Precisely. And that awareness, that conscious choice is the crucial first step in the process of habit change. It's like finally being able to read the instruction manual for your own brain.
Right.
And once you understand the code, you can start rewriting it.
I love that analogy. It makes those ingrained habits seem less intimidating and more like something we can actually change.
Exactly. And speaking of change, that brings us to the second law. Make it attractive. This is where we tap into the power of dopamine, that feel-good neurotransmitter that fuels our motivation.
So we're talking about harnessing the power of pleasure to build good habits. Sign me up.
Right. The idea is to make those desired behaviors so enticing that our brains actually crave them. One way to do this is through a technique called temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling. That sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
It's all about linking an activity you need to do with something you genuinely enjoy. For example, imagine you're trying to establish a regular exercise routine, but you'd rather spend that time catching up on your favorite podcasts.
Okay, I can definitely relate to that.
Well, with temptation bundling, you'd only allow yourself to listen to those podcasts while you're exercising. Suddenly, that workout becomes a lot more appealing because it's associated with something you love.
It's like tricking your brain into craving the gym. I love it. It's amazing how those small tweaks can make such a big difference.
Exactly. And that brings us to the third law. Make it easy. Remember, our brains are wired to conserve energy, so the easier it is to do something, the more likely we are to repeat it.
It's like choosing the path of least resistance, right? So how do we apply that to building better habits?
One powerful strategy is the 2-minute rule. The idea is to break down any new habit into something so small and manageable that it takes no more than 2 minutes to do.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Let's say you want to start meditating daily, but the thought of sitting still for 30 minutes feels daunting. Instead of setting yourself up for failure with this huge goal, start by simply sitting quietly and focusing on your breath for just 2 minutes each day.
So it's about lowering the barrier to entry, proving to yourself that you can actually follow through even on those days when motivation is low.
Exactly. It's about building that initial momentum, that sense of, I can do this,
Hmm.
which then makes it easier to stick with the habit over time.
It's like priming the pump. Once those initial drops start flowing, it becomes easier to keep the momentum going.
Precisely. And that brings us to the fourth and final law.
Yeah.
Make it satisfying. This is all about tapping into the brain's reward system and ensuring that those good habits are actually enjoyable.
Because let's face it, we're more likely to repeat behaviors that feel good, right? So how do we make those healthy habits more rewarding?
Well, it could be as simple as tracking your progress, giving yourself a small reward after completing a task, or even just acknowledging your efforts and celebrating those small wins.
Those small wins are so important. It's like giving yourself those little dopamine hits that reinforce the positive behavior.
Exactly. Remember, our brains love those immediate rewards.
Right.
So the closer we can bring that sense of satisfaction to the action itself, the more likely we are to repeat it. But even with the perfect system in place, those four laws, the awareness tools, even temptation bundling, sometimes we hit a wall. We start questioning our ability to change. We wonder if we're really capable of achieving those big goals.
It's that inner critic rearing its ugly head, right? That voice that says, who are you kidding? You're not cut out for this.
And that, my friend, is where the true magic of atomic habits comes in. It's not just about optimizing those individual actions. It's about understanding how those habits, those seemingly small choices we make each day, shape our identity.
So it's not just about doing the things that successful people do. It's about becoming the kind of person who succeeds.
Exactly. It's about shifting your self-perception, embracing the identity of someone who embodies those qualities you aspire to. But we're just scratching the surface here. There's so much more to uncover, and trust me, this next part is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, you left me hanging with that one. Identity, right. You were saying it ties into these atomic habits we're building. Feels kind of like an aha moment when you really think about it.
Absolutely. And you see, when we focus on those small, consistent actions that align with that desired identity of ours, something really incredible happens. We'll
Yeah.
start to embody those qualities, and then those qualities become self-reinforcing.
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, right? You see yourself as someone who is disciplined and successful, and you make the choices to support that.
Precisely. And those choices, those small wins, they just further solidify that belief and create this upward spiral of growth and transformation.
That makes a lot of sense. So how do we tap into that power? How do we figure out who we want to be and then actually, start acting like it?
Well, this is where that concept of finding your game comes in. Remember how we talked about our brains being wired for efficiency? Always looking for those shortcuts.
Yes. Those automatic solutions to problems that come up again and again.
Right. Well, when we find those activities that feel like play to us, but work to others, that's when we're tapping into those natural talents and those passions. We're basically hacking our brain's reward system to work for us, not against us.
So it's like finding that sweet spot, right? Where your natural abilities kind of collide with those challenges you actually enjoy, the ones that make you completely lose track of time. I love how Clear says it in the book. He says, habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. But like with compound interest, it takes time to see those crazy results.
That's a great point, and it highlights something really important in all of this. Patience and persistence. We live in a world that's so obsessed with instant gratification, right? But real lasting change, it takes time. Remember that example we talked about, British cycling? They didn't just become Olympic champions overnight. It's about those tiny 1% improvements, those little tweaks that seemed insignificant in the moment, but they added up to those crazy results.
They even optimize things like hand washing techniques and pillow selection, right? Because every detail mattered when you're aiming for excellence. And they stuck with those small changes day after day, and the results, well, they speak for themselves.
Exactly. It's like those red dots on the fake bird beaks. We might not even be aware of the seemingly small things that are holding us back or propelling us forward.
Yeah, and that reminds me, you mentioned earlier how habits, they're those methods we've learned to use, but not always the best ones, right?
Absolutely. It's so easy to get stuck in that rut, just repeating those same patterns, even when they stop working for us. But the good news is we can learn new ways of doing things. You can always upgrade those habits, upgrade those systems, and ultimately upgrade yourself.
It's about being open to those new possibilities, right? Experimenting with different approaches and just always striving to become that best version of yourself. Recognizing that you have the power, to choose your thoughts, to choose those habits you cultivate, and ultimately to choose the life that you want to create.
You said it. We aren't just products of our past experiences or our genes or even our environments. We have agency. We have that power to choose a different path, to create those new habits, and to really shape our own destinies.
Now, that is an empowering thought. And, I think it really gets at the heart of atomic habits. It's not about some magic formula for success, but really understanding the science behind those small changes, the power of consistently showing up, and that incredible potential that we all have inside us.
Beautifully said. And when we embrace those principles, when we make that commitment to those small daily improvements, it's like unlocking a whole world of possibilities and the ripple effect of that. It goes way beyond just ourselves.
What a great point to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into atomic habits. Keep those small wins coming, everyone.